Hello and welcome to another episode of Knowledge Enthusiast Reacts or Comments on. In this case, we react on the Russian Revolution of Oversimplified. And as I said in the previous video, Oversimplified is one of my most favorite channels on YouTube. I am a Patreon of them and I like pretty much every video they put out there. And when they released this, I was happy as heck. I was busy with editing 3 other videos, so I couldn't watch it right then. And this is the reason why I upload this a few days after the video came out. But nevertheless, it is a great channel. They make great content. And the Russian Revolution is in fact a very interesting topic, a topic I don't know very much about. I know that there were 2 revolutions, one uprising and a civil war, with the 2 revolutions and the uprising taking place all in 1917, with the February Revolution, the July uprisings, and the October Revolution. And I know a little bit about the imperial family because they were German or of German descent. And I will talk. I won't even say I will try not to talk that much because usually it don't works out. So I will try to learn with you, and if I make mistakes or think that there's something I want you to have clarification on or more information on, then of course you have this little info text box which will guide you through everything that I will say here. And also, short introduction, I'm Ossi Isborn, I'm 31 years old, I'm a former history student without degree and a former video game journalist. I am a fan of gathering knowledge. I am born in East Germany but raised and now living in Hamburg, Germany. So yeah, without further ado, let's just begin with the Russian Revolution by Oversimplified.
This video was made possible by NordVPN. Click on the link in the description below to get an amazing 68% off a 2-year plan. Also, commemorating the weirdest bromance in history. Get your new character pins and Russian Revolution merch available now. Link down below. Hey Jimmy, it's the 1800s, an exciting time to be alive. Why don't you get out there and explore the world? Gee whiz, Mom, thanks. This place is amazing. Where am I? Why, you're in France, my boy. Here we come up with wacky new ways of running.
What do we have here? Paris. What? Paris of the future. Okay, yeah, the Tour de Eiffel. I think I don't know what year exactly it would be here, but I think the Tour de Eiffel was built in the late 19th century, more or less after the first wave of Industrial Revolution. You have the balloons, which were invented in the 18th century, I think, if I remember correctly. You have bicycles here in the background, which in that form, I think, were not a thing at that time, but I could be wrong. And yeah, this is the glorious time after the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars. I think.
It's amazing. Where am I? Why, you're in France, my boy. Here we come up with wacky new ways of running a country. Liberty, equality, fraternity.
Which were the 3 main philosophies of the French Revolution, which were in French it was liberté, égalité et fraternité. In German it's Freiheit, Gleichheit, Brüderlichkeit. Or as you see here, liberty, equality, fraternity. Yeah, which is also the foundation of modern societies all around the world, are based on these 3 principles of humanity, more or less, that were coined in the French Revolution, and which is the reason for the flag of France.
My boy, here we come up with wacky new ways of running a country. Liberty, equality, fraternity. Whoa, welcome to the United...
Paddington. I think this is a reference to Paddington Bear, a children's book from UK, I think. And yeah, you have the steam-powered locomotive or train in the background. And yeah, Great Britain, especially London, was famous for the train system.
Country, liberty, equality, fraternity. Whoa, welcome to the United Kingdom. Here we invented the train. Whoa, aboard! Holy smokes! You're in a German factory, my friend. Here we harness fire and coal to create all these sexy lederhosen.
You might know, if you watched the reaction or commenting on Germany by Geography Now, lederhosen is a very, very Bavarian and Austrian thing. It has nothing to do, especially with the part of Germany which is depicted here, because most likely it will be the Rhine-Ruhr area, so North Rhine-Westphalia, more or less, where all the coal mines were, and the industrial heartland of Germany. And as you might know, lederhosen are also not made of fire and coal. They were made of leather.
You're in a German factory, my friend. Here we harness fire and coal to create all these sexy lederhosen. This is incredible. I can't wait to see where I'll end up next. Where am I? You're in Russia. Have I gone back in time? No, this is just how it is. Are you a farmer? Worse. Technically, my landlord owns me, which makes me a serf. I'm scared. You should be, because I haven't eaten in 4 days, and you look pretty tasty. Hey, Jimmy, how are your travels? I hate you!
Yeah, the Industrial Revolution took place in most of the countries at different times. So usually it is depicted that the British were the first to industrialize rapidly, and then followed by the US and the French and the Germans, which then, as I said, surpassed them at the end of the century. In Russia, on the other hand, they had none of it. They had... So we have to go back in time like a little bit more than 100 years. More or less, depending on when exactly this would be depicted here, to Catherine the Great. It's okay. Don't be so loud. I'm recording a video here. So we have to go back to Catherine the Great, which ruled over Russia as more or less a foreign ruler. She was originally and born in Germany, was sent to Russia with the help of the Prussian King Prince Frederick II, or Frederick the Great as you know him today, and overruled her own husband. And she had a child. And that child was not raised by her, but by her mother-in-law or surrogate mother, Elizabeth, and therefore was parted from his mother. And while Catherine the Great deserved this name because she more or less opened the country to more democratic ideas, she wanted the people from all over Russia, and with people I mean, you know, higher status people, to take part in the governing of Russia, to suggest ideas, to come together in some kind of council, and made some very enlightened changes for the country, but because her son was so distant from her and not really involved in all the diplomatic diplomatic business of Russia, he when Catherine died and he would become the Tsar or the emperor, he more or less made a full turn backwards and cancelled a lot of things that were achieved. Even things like the serfdom. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not an expert on Russian history, but if I remember correctly, Catherine even made some slight attempts to make serfdom better, which was very controversial at that time because serfs were the main working force, especially in more rural areas of Russia, but all over Russia. And her son, I forgot his name, changed everything back. And from then on, some would then follow Catherine's son. Some would maybe even try to reinstate things that Catherine has achieved. But it was more or less chaos with the House Romanov. And the people who were suffering the most on that chaos were the serfs, who basically were slaves. And they were legally not seen as slaves because they had slightly more rights than slaves. I guess I will put it in the info box what exactly a serf is, or at least a short definition of what a serf is. But yeah, and the what I was what my point was is the whole industrialization just went by in Russia. They would not really industrialize until the very end of the 19th century, and even then only with mild reforms, with mild so basically they whereas other countries were rapidly industrializing, Russia would more like be very controversial and saying maybe you can have a factory and that's it. And one big reason for that was the serfs, because who would work in the factory? If you put a factory somewhere and industrialize, you need workers there. But most of the people in Russia were serfs or at a more or less equal status, and so who would work there? So you had to abandon serfdom. And this was done, I think, in the mid 19th century by Alexander II, I think, the great son of Catherine, or great son of Catherine. I will put it in the info box, or maybe he will even talk about it. But even after then, they it's very complicated. And maybe he will talk about it, because I'm as I said, not really an expert.
Hey Jimmy, how are your travels?
But I'm liking the
I
video
hate
so far.
you!
Russia in the 19th century, feudal, underdeveloped, and stuck in the past. While the rest of Europe had been modernizing and improving their citizens' lives, Russia's rulers were taking a different approach. My lord, we're falling behind the rest of Europe. It's time to industrialize, give the people rights, and share your power. Russian czars had no time for pathetic ideas like liberty and modernization, because they were too busy having the time of their lives. While the serfs were breaking their backs in the fields, the czars held all the power, and they didn't have to listen to anyone. Want to run the country like a backwards feudal kingdom while the rest of Europe outpaces you militarily and economically? Go right ahead. Want to keep the people uneducated so they don't get any ideas? There's no one to stop you. Want to keep exporting grain even when they...
Which is one of the things that Catherine, one of the reforms Catherine, I don't know if she succeeded, but at least she wanted to make, was to fight illiteracy and give the people the opportunity to go to school, to learn, which was one of, if she succeeded, would be one of the things that her son would just scratch and revert everything to the old aristocratic and nobles first policies.
People uneducated so they don't get any ideas? There's no one to stop you. Want to keep exporting grain even when there's a massive famine causing hundreds of thousands to die? That is your God-given right. While all of this was great for the Tsar, if you were literally anybody else, it probably sucked because Russia was falling behind. If they were to keep up with Europe, they'd need a strong ruler with some big ideas. Oh look, here comes one now. Hey everyone, it's me, Tsar Alexander II, and I've got some big news. I'm releasing you all from your serfdom. You're all free.
Yes!
Yep, I'm the best. Oh, there is one thing though. I spoke to your local lords and they weren't happy about losing all their free labor. So as a compromise, you're all gonna have to pay them back a near impossible amount of money for the next 49 years. Expect your lives to barely change. Okay, bye. Now I know what you're thinking. This Tsar Alexander II seems like a pretty cool guy. He's trying to reform the country and get Russia on the right path. Everyone must love this guy, right? Wrong. Why does one man get to decide the fate of everyone in the country? This whole system is dumb. Somebody should do something. Like what? Like kill the Tsar. You're gonna kill the Tsar? Well, me? No. I'm
These two look a bit like, this could be Stalin, this could be Leo Trotsky. But I think that's not intentional. And yeah, so the serfdom was abolished, but at a high cost. Like, think of slavery in the US. In 1865, slavery was abandoned in the US. And now imagine that all these slaves would now have to pay for 50 years some kind of reparation for their owners. So they're free now. They can go to work whatever they want. They can get paid, but a huge cut of that pay would go to their former owners, which is a very crazy system. But Tsar Alexander, nonetheless, was seen as more or less good Tsar and someone who did things for the people. And we have the same thing again with what we had with Catherine and her son, because his son, who will succeed him, will again more or less scratch all the politics of his father and do sometimes the exact opposite, which has to do with the way the Tsar dies, which I'm sure they will come to now.
Like what? Like kill the Tsar. You're gonna kill the Tsar? Well, me? No. I'm busy. I was kind of hoping you'd do it. Okay. See? The people love me. They're throwing flowers, confetti, and high-grade explosives. Okay, Nicholas.
Actually, so Tsar Alexander II was in some kind of procession. He was just leaving the palace, and he was more or less still in front of the palace. And then the cart was hit by a can full of explosives, and did damage the cart, did damage some people, but the Tsar itself remained more or less untouched. So he was fine, he was still alive, everything was good. And while the those responsible were arrested or looked for to arrest them, and the Tsar actually took care of those who were hurt. He turned back to the cart, and then another explosive came along, which then full blast hit him. And Nicholas II, the last Tsar, which was the grandson of Alexander II, was actually there witnessing all this and witnessing his grandfather dying. And some believe this might have not only influenced his father, the next Tsar, who, as I said, will revoke everything that Alexander has achieved, but also Nicholas, who would be more or less cautious of the public.
Throwing flowers, confetti, and high-grade explosives. Okay, Nicholas, your grandfather has a mild case of being blown up by a terrorist, and he's not looking too hot. So we're gonna go say our goodbyes, okay? No, it'll be too scary for him. Nonsense, it won't be scary at all. We're just gonna say a quick goodbye. Ready?
Boy, look at me. The people did this to me. And one day, they'll do it to you!
See? Wasn't scary at all. So Alexander II was dead, but luckily, they had another Alexander lying around, Alexander III, and he felt his dad's reforms had weakened the Tsar's authority. Russia was massive, and as a result, had many ethnic minorities. Non-Russians? More interested in their own cultural heritage than in loving me? Isn't it great? So much beautiful culture and diversity in our great nation. Alexander...
At this point, it's very, quote-unquote, funny to see that Alexander III's son, Nicholas II, will be the one protecting the... So, you know how the First World War started. The Austria-Hungary was an empire full of ethnic minorities in their own respective regions, and some of them wanted freedom. And some of them had declared freedom in the years before from either Austria-Hungary or from the Ottoman Empire. And Serbia was one of those who declared freedom, and Russia would protect their claim to independence, even militarily, which was the start of the First World War when Austria-Hungary attacked Serbia. So just one generation later, or earlier, with the father of Tsar Nicholas II, Alexander III, who himself had a vast empire full of ethnic minorities who wanted to become independent, at least some of them, or to have some kind of independency, was repressing all of that. So like I said, with Tsars in Russia, and even after that with the leaders of Russia, with Lenin being very different than Stalin being very different than Khrushchev, and so on and so on and so on. This is why Russia over centuries was not seen as a very stable empire, as not a very stable country, because every time a new ruler comes around, everything would be started from scratch, more or less.
Isn't it great? So much beautiful culture and diversity in our great nation. Alexander thought all these minorities should be a little more Russian, and thereby loyal to him. So he repressed religious minorities. He repressed non-Russians. He introduced the Okhrana, a secret police force that repressed anybody who thought having a Tsar was dumb. If Alexander II was the great reformer, Alexander III was the great repressor.
Hello, Eds.
Now that's how you run a country. Hey, Dad? Ugh, great. It's my son Nicholas, who I like to call a girly girl because he's so weak and pathetic. When are you gonna grow up? You still look like a girly girl to me.
I love how they even show the girly girl by taking emphasis on the eyes. The first thing I see is the eyes, these blue eyes, who are more soft than the ones of Alexander to the left. So great attention to detail, I think.
Are you gonna grow up? You still look like a girly girl to me. But Dad, I grew a beard. Yeah, an ugly girly girl beard. If Nicholas was to one day be Tsar, he needed his dad to teach him how to run the country. But his dad instead suggested that Nicholas go somewhere else. So Nicholas went to Japan, got a...
Nicholas did actually traveled around the world. So he went to various countries. I know he was in Indonesia during these travels, which would last for some months. And I think he was in India, and he was in Japan, where actually he got attacked by a policeman. So there's that. And with attacked, I mean it's seen as an assassination attempt by these Japanese policemen, who might have had ties to the Russian anti-Tsar movement or something like that. I actually don't know. I only know about the assassination attempt. And yeah, after the travels to Japan, he came then back to Russia over Vladivostok, and then back to St. Petersburg, where he actually was made some kind of minister, if I remember correctly, and had his first insights in the in governing the country. And I think 2, 3, 4 years later, his father then died.
Run the country. But his dad instead suggested that Nicholas go somewhere else. So Nicholas went to Japan, got an edgy dragon tattoo, had his head sliced off by a policeman, and then came home. Now will you teach me how to rule? I suppose it's time. Okay, there's a lot you need to know before becoming Tsar. Uh-oh. What? I've got kidney inflammation. Oh no! Upon his father's death, a totally unprepared Nicholas II ascended to the Russian throne. He wasn't a reformer like his grandfather, nor was he a repressor like his dad. Nicholas was Nicholas. Timid, easily swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is.
And Nicholas was actually engaged at that point. He was engaged for love with a German princess by the name of Alix with I, and she and they went together to St. Petersburg, and they were supposed to marry in 1985, 95. I always forget if it's 95 or 85 when he took reign, but it was around 1 year later after he took reign. Which was set before his father died. So when then the father died, they rushed the wedding because he needed to be wed as soon as possible, and there were even some voices against it, and so against the marriage at all. Nicholas had to do some groundwork with on one hand with the Germans, on the other hand with the Russians, to have this marriage for love happening, which I only know because I researched a bit about Anastasia and stuff, and I have no clue what this is and what the heck.
Was Nicholas. Timid, easily swayed, and more interested in doing whatever the hell this is. Or this. Or this. He wasn't ready to rule, and he himself admitted it, saying, "I'm not yet ready to be Tsar. I know nothing of the business of ruling." Bit of an awkward time to bring it up. However, Nicholas firmly believed that he was chosen by God to be Russia's big daddy. And while he doubted his ability to rule, he was gonna give it his best shot. And hey, who knows? Maybe he wouldn't be so bad after all. To get things off to a good start, Nicholas promised free pretzels and beer to a huge crowd in Moscow to celebrate his coronation. So enticing a proposition to starving peasants.
I found Waldo. There is Waldo. You see him?
That the ensuing stampede left nearly 1,500 people dead.
Oh yeah. So the thing with that is, so to celebrate the coronation of Tsar Nicholas, he wanted to have a big party for the people because he wanted to see more or less as a people's person. So they should have been I think 100,000 presents, free gifts for almost everyone, because I think 400,000 or so were there, and buffets and free drinks and music and theater. And at 2 p.m. the emperor himself, or the Tsar himself, would show himself and greet the people and stuff. And this was actually set to be a big, nice party. The problem was the location, and with all parties, it's always the location. So those responsible choose a very, very bad place for the expected masses, because they chose an exercise place, which was very, very small, and had some kind of trenches around it, which would prove to be graves for a lot of them. And this very limited area, combined with over 400,000 people attending even the night before arriving, so they could get some of the third point, free gifts and free meat and free food and free drinks and everything free, which in a country where people are hungry is on one hand a good thing, on the other hand a very bad idea if the rest is executed bad. And so early in the morning, even before all the festivities started, there was some kind of mass panic, because some people thought that they would actually start to give out the presents. So everyone was rushing to these places where the presents should have given out, but they were so densely compressed on that field that you might remember there was in Düsseldorf, I think, a few years ago, the Love Parade tragedy, which also had a mass panic with people being squeezed and trampled to death, and you can imagine this to be like this. I read a first-hand account from someone who was there, who stated something like, yeah, it was so dense that people couldn't even fall. So they weren't trampled. They were just squeezed and couldn't breathe. And next to this person was a dead body who was breathing or wasn't breathing for a long time now. And it was scary to see. And at some point during this, it wasn't all about the presence anymore. It was about the panic of being killed by the masses. And what made the whole thing even worse was the fact that there were these trenches around. And so the actual place was limited. And when the people reached these trenches, they would push people in without even knowing about it. They would push people in these trenches, and on top of those people who are already in the trenches, which would then more or less squeeze under their weight those who were below. And yeah, it was 96. So in 95, the marriage should have been. So yeah, this was huge thing, and very, very tragic loss of, as he said, 1,500 or more lives. Yeah, it is always a bad idea to crowd a lot of people in a small area, because this has happened so much in history. And yeah.
Enticing a proposition to starving peasants that the ensuing stampede left nearly 1,500 people dead. What the hell happened? We're not sure, but you're scheduled to go party with the French at 8 o'clock. Shouldn't I stay here out of respect for the people? When have Russian czars ever respected the people?
This is an exaggeration. So before the Triple Entente, so before France, Great Britain, and Russia formed their alliance, which was one of the starting points or reasons for World War One and the formation of the Central Powers. Russia's only real ally was France. And this meeting at the evening, or this party at the evening, was a high diplomatic affair. So if the Tsar would not go to that, this could be seen as an affront by the French, who in return could revoke the alliance with Russia, which also would mean that Russia was there all alone and had no real allies. And to prevent that, Tsar Nicholas II, who actually did not want to go, did go, and were therefore then seen as a Tsar who does not care about the people, even though he did, and even though he just was, for diplomatic reasons, bound to go there. Even though today, in retrospective, we can't be sure, because if the French would know about the tragedy, maybe they would understand and would not just revoke. But this would have been a gamble at that time, so he went.
When have Russian czars ever respected the people?
But it was not done out of disrespect.
Nicholas's decision to go party with the French immediately tarnished his image. Some were calling him Nicholas the Bloody. The Tsars had been partying hard at the expense of the people for long enough. They'd emancipated the serfs, but failed to lift them out of poverty. They used their secret police to crack down on anyone who might criticize them, and they'd failed to modernize and give the people rights, something the rest of Europe had begun doing over a century ago. The rule of the Tsars was quickly becoming outdated, and more Russians began wondering if there was a better way. For many, the solution was simple. Just look to the West. Republics, democracies, and constitutional monarchies galore. But a small growing group rejected that for an even better idea, a little something they called communism. Take Vladimir Lenin, an intelligent member of Russia's middle class, and also a massive ill-tempered jerk. If you disagreed with him about anything, he wasn't afraid to call you out. You fat-headed, simple-minded, vapid, cockeyed imbecile! Tenderheart Bear is a far superior Care Bear to Bedtime Bear. And he was no stranger to political unrest either. His older brother was executed for plotting to kill the Tsar, and Lenin himself was expelled from university for participating in a student protest. But how did...
Which he only participated. He was not a leading figure or something. And it is believed, even though his Lenin had very good grades in school and on university, and his professor even would protect Lenin and would say no, he did nothing wrong. But it is believed that purely because of his brother, he was expelled as well.
Tsar, and Lenin himself was expelled from university for participating in a student protest. But how did Lenin go from being a middle-class nerd to the arbiter of socialist divinity? Well, to tell that story, we first need to go back a few decades to when a man named Karl Marx wrote a manifesto explaining how
and Friedrich Engels. Do not forget Friedrich Engels. The whole Marxism and the Communist Manifest was thought on and written and formulated by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, two people from, again, Germany, because why not? And yeah, do not forget Friedrich Engels.
To tell that story, we first need to go back a few decades to when a man named Karl Marx wrote a manifesto explaining how capitalism is a system whereby the stinky bourgeoisie oppressed and exploited the working masses, and that only through class warfare could the workers rise up and instate a communist utopia. Now go back forward a few decades to Lenin reading that manifesto and loving it. But publicly admitting you loved Marx and not Russia's big daddy would get you the cruelest punishment imaginable. Exile to Siberia. Enjoy exile, where you'll live with your wife, chill around town, and secretly write socialist newspapers. Hey, that doesn't sound so bad. And your mother-in-law is going to live with you. No! Once...
But being exiled to Siberia was seen as a cruel punishment. But Lenin actually met his wife there and did marry her there. So he was not exiled together with his wife, because he had no wife when he was exiled there. He just met her there.
And your mother-in-law is going to live with you.
So it's no wonder why the mother-in-law is also
Once
there.
Lenin finished his stint in Siberia, he left Russia for Europe, where he was free to hang out with other Russian Marxists and talk about how great communism
That's a lot of commercials.
was. Now today, you might hear the word communism and think of this.
Free healthcare is what? Is seen as communist? We have this here in Germany. Even before communism.
Now today, you might hear the word communism and think of this. But that's not how intellectuals living under a tough czarist regime saw it. To them, communism promised a land where all were equal, where workers weren't exploited, and even people like you could get a girlfriend. So Lenin joined a party of Russian communists living in Europe, and he founded a communist newsletter that was smuggled into Russia to try to radicalize the people. However, not everyone in the Socialist Party agreed with Lenin. In fact, they disagreed with him on a lot of issues, and Lenin was so uncompromising that he caused a split in the party. During one conference, a heated debate broke out, and Lenin was unwilling to give an inch.
You pig-ignorant, half-witted, fatuous morons!
Cereal is a soup! Listen, Lenin, you're a smart guy, but you have no idea what you're talking about. We're out of here. All in favor of cereal being a soup? Hey, would you look at that? We're in the majority. So Lenin set up his own faction within the party he called the majority, or Bolshevik if you're speaking Russian. And the other faction became known as the minority, or Menshevik. And oddly, the majority were often in the minority, and the minority in the majority. The Mensheviks were less radical, whereas Lenin wanted the Bolsheviks to be loyal to him and his uncompromising ideas. And if you weren't loyal, well then you're gonna get a big brain beatdown. Mensheviks worried that Lenin's attitude could lead to a one-man dictatorship. But come on, does this guy look like a dictator to you?
Yes.
For now, Lenin remained in Europe, writing his socialist newspaper and impatiently awaiting an opportunity to overthrow the Tsar and bring communist utopia to Russia. Cool. A free hat. Who the heck are you? I'm definitely not a Russian secret police officer spying on Marxists. Oh crap, I don't want secret police watching me. Then you, my friend, should use NordVPN.
I love
Do
this
you like having
sequence.
your identity stolen? If yes, you need therapy. If no, you need NordVPN. NordVPN has thousands of super fast servers in 62 countries that you can connect to keep you and your data secure when using the web. It comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and is now faster and more secure than ever with its brand new NordLynx technology. Have you quarantine binged all of your favorite shows on Netflix? Well, with NordVPN, you can watch the Australian version. Or is one of the greatest videos on YouTube still banned in your country? I think you get the point.
The Hitler videos, I don't know. If I go to the Oversimplified channel on my PC, I think I won't found them, even though I found re-uploads of that, which are online for years now. And when I go to the channel on my smartphone, I will find it by Oversimplified from the Oversimplified channel. But I don't know if that is due to the fact that my YouTube on my smartphone is set to English. Maybe because I don't know. Yes, in the video has swastika in it, so there is the likelihood that it would be banned in Germany, even though in educational purposes the swastika is not banned. So I don't know if the video is banned in your country. Please tell me what country that is, because I always thought, okay, but I can watch it in Germany. So I could only imagine Germany or Austria to be the countries where the video is banned. Because as far as I know, only here the Symbolica is banned.
Or is one of the greatest videos on YouTube still banned in your country? I think you get the point. You can now get NordVPN with 68% off a 2-year plan for only $371 per month, plus 1 month free. So click on nordvpn.com/oversimplified in the description below and get protected now. That's nordvpn.com/oversimplified. And as always, you'll be supporting my channel. So muchos arigatos, mon petit pois. Now where was I? Oh yeah. A timid, easily swayed czar, a massive ill-tempered jerk, impatiently awaiting a communist revolution. And revolution was coming, but not in the way Lenin thought. Back in St. Petersburg, one of the Tsar's most skilled and influential advisors knew the country finally needed to catch up with the rest of Europe. Hey Nick, we really got to industrialize, get more factories, and make some, I don't know, textiles or something. Won't that change the social fabric of Russia? Maybe. Hey, isn't it past your bedtime? But I haven't had my milk and snuggles yet.
So, yeah, like I said earlier, this is at the turn to the 20th century, where all of Europe and North America is already not only industrialized, but already went through the very bad time of industrialization with child labor and environmental damage, and in some places we're already reverting to revoke some of these effects. In Germany, you already had healthcare. In the US, you had the 8 hours work, 8 hours recreation, and 8 hours sleep rules, and stuff like that. So they were not only industrializing, they already had all these social structures implemented to make the work conditions better, while Russia was not even on the first step of being of industrializing, because again they had these social structures and more or less a lack of people who would actually work in those factories due to those social structures.
Russia? Maybe. Hey, isn't it past your bedtime? But I haven't had my milk and snuggles yet. Will you snuggle me? Nicholas thought modernization was boring, but he let Sergei do his thing. And do his thing he did. He borrowed some money and got Russia some sexy factories. And you know what sexy factories means. Sexy workers. Dirt poor, sexy workers. Long hours, low wages, filthy disease-ridden factories, sleep in overcrowded dormitories with all your stinky worker friends, get your arms ripped off in a freak Russian doll accident. Conditions were terrible. But this growing working class wasn't about to take it lying down. They started to do what workers do best. Strike. Despite Sergei's efforts, people in Russia still weren't happy. Peasants were still poor, liberals still wanted reform, and now the workers wanted better working conditions. And the problem with being an autocrat is that when everyone's unhappy, there's only one person to blame. You. The people hate me. What do I do? Ooh, I know. Why don't we find a weak and pathetic nation to go to war with? We'll win easily, and everyone will love me again. Why don't we just try treating the people better? As luck would have it, an opportunity for war was forming in the Far East. Russia wanted to expand its sphere of influence into northern China, and coincidentally, so did Japan.
Yeah, they wanted to build a railway through Manchuria, and would also interfere in, I think it was like here or something. They would interfere in Korean affairs, I think, or in territory that belonged to Korea or Japan or something like this. And so the construction of the railroad was guarded. And when they finished, it was even more heavily guarded, which then went on to become the Russo-Japanese War, and in which Japan, for the first time at that point, would show the world that they, after being opened and after the Meiji Restoration, are a force to be reckoned with. And they actually won.
Russia wanted to expand its sphere of influence into northern China, and coincidentally, so did Japan. But Japan didn't really want war, so they proposed an idea to reduce the tension. Hey man, we'll let you do your thing in Manchuria if you let us do our thing in Korea. I don't think so. We've got the largest army in the world. What do you have? I'm the Emperor of Japan. I have a giant mecha suit. Whoa. Cool. Nicholas and the boys didn't see Japan as a threat, so they felt they could push Japan around. But little did they know Japan had been rapidly militarizing, and when they launched a surprise attack on a Russian fleet at Port Arthur, everyone was shocked.
Yeah, so in what was it, like 1866 or something, General, I always want to say Paul McCartney. No, it's not the singer, it's the actor from Friends, Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry? Was it Matthew Perry? You know who I mean. Came with his boats and said basically, yo, Japan, open up the country. And then Japan opened up the country because they had no other choice. The whole Meiji Restoration came along, where Japan was rapidly industrialized and also militarized. The whole Bushido, samurai, stuff like that were all abandoned. And the then Emperor of Japan wanted to have a nice, sexy army with modern rifles, modern guns, modern training. They even hired people from around the world, especially America, to train them. Even though it's not historically accurate, but you can get a slight grasp in the movie The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, or in the manga Kenshin, or I don't know how it is in English, but it's both taking place at the same time with some of the same elements in it. And the Japanese army was very good equipped, very good trained, and very industrialized, whereas the Russian army, the only thing Russia had, even in the First World War, was manpower. And you saw in the Civil War in America, you saw, okay, manpower, like when Ulysses S. Grant just throw his men at the Confederation and more or less butchered them, can help you win a war. But only if both parties are more or less equal in equipment. If you have a very better equipped army versus a larger but lesser equipped army, then all throughout history this always ends bad for the army with more people. This is why Russia in the end lost the war in Manchuria, because they were not prepared. And even though they could throw millions of people, literally millions of people, at the Japanese army, they would just get all killed and Russia would still lose the war.
Militarizing. And when they launched a surprise attack on a Russian fleet at Port Arthur, everyone was shocked. Nicholas hoped it was an opportunity to win a quick war and regain the support of the people. Nobody seriously thought a puny Asian country could defeat a European superpower, and the Russian people were filled with patriotic spunk. Hey everyone, we're at war with Japan! Hey everyone, we're losing the war.
Again? How many?
The Japanese won, an embarrassing defeat for Tsar Nicholas. Russia had enough problems, but now it had been internationally humiliated. The public were outraged. Unrest increased. Nicholas needed snuggles now more than ever. The tension was rising rapidly, and Russia was on the verge of revolution. All it needed was one disaster to push it over the edge. And that disaster would come in January 1905 from an unlikely source, a handsome Orthodox priest named Father Gapon. Father Gapon was leading workers and their families to the Winter Palace, but this wasn't some violent uprising, it was a peaceful protest. They wanted to deliver a petition to Nicholas, which simply asked for more freedom and better working
better working conditions, better working hours, limitations on state officials' power, introduction of a national parliament. So these are all things the other industrialized nations already had. I don't know exactly about Japan, but you had this in Germany, even with healthcare and other insurances, and with working parties that were representing the interests of the working class in the politics. You had in America, you had, like I said, the 8-hour days, and again, better working conditions, which in Great Britain you also had that with the abandonment of child labor, and I think they also got better pay and stuff like that. And you had a national parliament in each and every of these countries, more or less related to the industrialization, but in some cases even before that, like in the US or in France. And but Russia had none of that. They just started to build factories. They just started to industrialize. They were, even though they could learn from all the other countries, they didn't, and they were making all the same mistakes. But instead of giving in to the people, I mean, in all the other countries, this wasn't done overnight. But it was not as brutally suppressed as it would be in Russia.
Protest. They wanted to deliver a petition to Nicholas, which simply asked for more freedom and better working conditions. The protest was actually so peaceful and respectful that the Marxists thought it was a big waste of time. Hey Nicholas, some priest is leading a peaceful protest. Says here they want to give you a petition. A peaceful petitioning priest? I better get out of here. Nicholas had actually left the Winter Palace days earlier, and in his place, they brought in a truckload of troops, ordered to stop Father Gapon from reaching the palace. Hello, good sir, and long live the Tsar. Please, allow me to pass this simple petition to our dear father, Nicholas II. Good day to you too. Please, allow us to respond by opening fire. What began as a peaceful protest ended in tragedy. Imperial soldiers opened fire on the crowd. Around 200 civilians died, 800 more were wounded. All they wanted was the opportunity to ask Nicholas to improve their lives. Instead, they were met with bullets. Nicholas didn't personally order the troops to fire, but as an autocrat, he got the blame. The event became known as Bloody Sunday.
Like, imagine you might all know about the Boston Massacre. So this more or less was the starting point of the American Revolution. And you have people who are not happy, and you have a military force preventing them from disturbing the peace, more or less, who keep them in check, but also without shooting. So it took a whole crowd throwing rocks and snowballs and stuff at those military personnel for them to open fire. The same in the French Revolution, which was a little bit bloodier, but as far as I remember, there were no gatherings that were brutally murdered and executed by the king. I could be wrong, but as far as I remember, something like this Bloody Sunday did not happen during the French Revolution, and it did also not happen during the revolutions of 1848. I mean, of course, there were minor skirmishes, but nothing of that scale. Not especially not to people who were just peaceful. Usually, when you open fire on a protesting crowd, then they have done something. So, like, they attacked the police force. They imposed a danger. But a priest with some followers, a piece of paper, very respectful, just being shot down is, I mean, I don't even understand how they could do it. How the soldiers could just open fire, even though they did nothing of that was of any danger to anyone.
Fire, but as an autocrat, he got the blame. The event became known as Bloody Sunday, and Nicholas's reputation plummeted. Strikes erupted across the empire. Workers' demands increased. Liberals demanded political power. Peasants demanded land. The country was out of control, and the 1905 revolution had begun. Listen, Nicholas, peasants seizing my land and murdering my family I can tolerate, but illegally chopping my wood? That's obscene! And the worse I treat my workers, the more they strike. I don't get it. Everyone relax. As long as the military is still on my side, there's nothing to worry about. Sir, the sailors are starting to mutiny. Well, my life just sucks! With Russia still losing to the Japanese, unrest was growing in the military, and some sailors had even taken to killing officers. Having the people against you was bad enough, but if the military joined in, it would be game over.
Yeah, this is what, or this is one of the reasons why the German Empire fell, because after, or technically during World War One, there was a mutiny of sailors in Kiel, which is kind of seen as the last straw or the last nail in the coffin of the emperor, because at that point an important they had orders from the more or less from the emperor to go and attack Great Britain, and they disobeyed these orders and even started some kind of revolution, which is now called I always forget the name, something uprising, and a slight revolution afterwards. And so yeah, if you lose the support of the military, then you have a problem, because those are the people responsible for protecting you, which was also the problem in the French Revolution, when the troops of Louis XVI did start to join the revolutionaries and did disobey orders to gun them down or to arrest them. And the only ones who remained more or less loyal were the Swiss Guards, which are mercenaries, so they get paid to be loyal, and did not suffer that much or had relatives suffering that much, because their relatives usually were in Switzerland. And so at this point, Tsar Nicholas has to do something.
Officers. Having the people against you was bad enough, but if the military joined in, it would be game over. To make matters worse, in October, workers and Marxists, including one Leon Trotsky, began setting up local elected councils called Soviets that coordinated strikes and supplied the workers. Sergei could see the writing on the wall. Things were going south fast, and he needed a big idea to save the Tsar. And luckily, he had just that. You see, all these angry people from different parts of society weren't really working together, meaning there was a weakness to exploit. Sergei wrote a manifesto that would give the liberals an elected assembly called the Duma. It took some convincing, but eventually, Nicholas agreed to share power and have his laws approved by an elected assembly. Hey liberals, here's your stupid manifesto. Happy now? We certainly are. But what about these guys? Aren't you gonna give them what they want? Oh, goodness no. I was just going to kill them. With the liberals satisfied, and after ending the war with Japan, the Tsar brought thousands of troops home, who then dismantled the Soviets, arrested their leaders, and crushed the peasant uprisings in the countryside. And how about that pesky parliament Nicholas had agreed to share power with? Well, he then wrote a bunch of new laws, which basically said, hey, remember that manifesto I wrote and how you guys were going to approve my laws? Slight change of plan. Actually, I'm going to do whatever the hell I want, and you guys are going to shut up. What? The people won't stand for this. People? What people? You know, this is why people don't like you. And just like that, Nicholas had survived the 1905 revolution.
This is, again, coming to the French Revolution is the most famous and most important revolution of all time, undoubtedly, in terms of people's revolutions. And they wanted to have a parliament, and they would get a parliament, but then the king tries to play them out and just, locks the building where they're meeting in, and then they meet somewhere else. But this is even, this is not only a repeat of history in another country, this is going one step further. Giving the people their parliament just to then revoke all their rights once you have established your power again and once you have control over the situation again. So whereas the French parliament did have some kind of legitimacy and power, which would not be very much revoked by Louis XVI, and he accepted it at one point. The Russian Tsar just said, "Yeah, here you have your Duma, and I'm back in 5 minutes. Let me just deal with all the other crap. I promise you, I won't then deal with you again." Then he deals with all the other stuff, and once his power is cemented again, he comes back to the Duma. Oh, by the way, you're fired. So he basically, you can say he was just buying some time with allowing the Duma, which on one hand is a very brilliant strategy. On the other hand, we all know how it ended in the end. So you win some, you lose some.
You know, this is why people don't like you. And just like that, Nicholas had survived the 1905 revolution. But wait, a revolution? In Russia? Where was Lenin? Well, Lenin and his communist pals were still in exile. He tried desperately to radicalize the uprising, but all he could do was watch. As the movements failed to organize, the liberals sold out the poor, and the Tsar outplayed the people. Furious, he believed Russia had missed a great chance for...
And also, they played them against each other, because when one group gets what they want, then the other groups will look at that group with distrust. So even when the Tsar then removes the legitimacy of the parliament, or the control that the parliament has, no one would jump in for them and say, you can't do that, because they already are either dead or distrusting them, because how did they get what we want and we don't? So this is, I just say it, if this all was intentionally how the way it played out, it was in some way brilliant. It would have been better if it would, for the Tsar at least, if it would have lasted longer, because later on he will be forced to abdicate. But at that point, you gotta say it's not that bad.
Poor, and the Tsar outplayed the people. Furious, he believed Russia had missed a great chance for a real revolution. From now on, he felt the only way left was an armed revolution by the workers. Watching the events of 1905 unfold, Lenin learned a lot. The Tsar, however, would prove to have learned nothing. After the 1905 revolution had failed, the Tsar's new top man was Pyotr Stolypin, and he had big ideas to prevent any more chaos. Step 1, reform agriculture. This'll make the peasants love you. And step 2, we'll kill anyone who doesn't. To discourage any more revolutionary ideas, Stolypin began to crack down even harder on the Tsar's opponents, and thousands were sentenced to death. The noose even earned itself a new nickname, Stolypin's necktie. I don't get it. Oh, I see, because it goes around my neck. That's so funny. But despite the oppression, many positive reforms were also being made, and the Russian economy even began to improve. This was a problem for Lenin. If the people weren't suffering, then they wouldn't support a revolution. Still in exile and lacking funds, the Bolsheviks simply weren't in a position to do anything. Luckily, it was around this time that Lenin met an incredibly handsome Georgian with your second favorite historical mustache, Joseph Stalin. Lenin and Stalin met at a communist convention in Finland, and Lenin liked Stalin because he was a real go-getter and was great at fundraising for the Bolsheviks. And by fundraising, I mean kidnapping, robbing, extorting, bribing, ransoming, assassinating, prison breaking, stealing, bank raiding, executioning, and stealing again. Hey Stalin, the Mensheviks aren't so hot in all this stealing, but we still need money. So the next time you do a big heist, just do it quietly. Okay, quietly. Got it. If this isn't quiet, I don't know what is. Stalin's wacky antics eventually got him exiled to Siberia, but he had established himself as a big balls Bolshevik. However, no amount of Bolshevik balls could stop what was happening. The Russian...
Sie tun alles, Ihr Kind bestmöglich zu schützen. Sie denken, Ihr Kind hat alle wichtigen Infos.
The Russian economy was making a recovery. For the Tsar, things were looking up. This is great. All Nicholas has to do is sit back and not mess anything up. Hey everyone, big news. I'd like to introduce you to my new best friend. He's a crazy, drunken, beardy, horny, scandal-ridden magic wizard man, and he smells like a goat. We're screwed. Rasputin, a dirt-poor peasant from dirt-poor nowhere. But unlike all the other dirt-poor peasants, Rasputin had holy healing powers. And when this holy mystic wandered into St. Petersburg, people began to notice. He quickly became famous, and word of this mystery man and his healing hands made its way to the royal palace. The appearance of a holy homeless healer was of great interest to the Tsar and his wife. As far as royals go, they weren't that inbred, but they were just inbred enough for their son Alexei to get hemophilia. Or in layman's terms, Mamma mia, that's a lot of blood.
Yeah, so in terms of family, Nikolai was a family man, After his grandfather was killed, the family actually left St. Petersburg and moved to a more rural, more isolated place where he would grow up together with his family, his siblings, his mother, and grow very strong family ties, which he will remain even as a Tsar. So family always was more or less the first priority for Nicholas, which is one of the reasons why he married for love and not for power. And but as a Tsar, he also had a problem because prior to Alexei being born, Nicholas and Alexandra had four girls, including the famous Anastasia, which would, as a royal, you always want a son, and the public always wants you to have a son, because this is the most easy way to have a new heir for the throne. Because girls weren't really allowed to sit on the throne, and nobody wants them on the throne. So when Nicholas and Alexandra had four girls, this was seen by the public as another weakness of the Tsar. So everyone was happy when Alexei was born, but he was a bleeder, and that's a problem. Which then led to them being, because they need a stable heir. They have these country in open rebellion, more or less. They have their struggles. They need something that they can be proud of, something that they can show the people, and that would be a strong male heir. And to get that, they would take measures like hiring Rasputin, who was said to be a healer and who actually succeeded in healing Alexei, which, by the way, he didn't. But
Alexei to get hemophilia, or in layman's terms, Mamma mia, that's a lot of blood. Knowing Rasputin could heal people, in 1906, Alexander...
Please come and cure my bloody son. Wash first, yours royally, Alexandra. Yeah.
Mamma mia, that's a lot of blood. Knowing Rasputin could heal people, in 1906, Alexandra asked for Rasputin to come and see if he could cure their son. And crazy as it sounds, Rasputin did heal Alexei, possibly by taking him off his doctor-prescribed aspirin. Having seemingly done the impossible, Rasputin became very, very close to the royal family. But having a crazy homeless wizard man hanging around wasn't a good look for the Tsar, because Rasputin was freaky. Not only was he a big fan of alcohol, but he'd also throw these crazy parties with Russian nobility, where he'd and all night long, and then he'd his whole head, not a guy's, and nobody knew how the goat got on the roof. Initially, the press were banned from talking about Rasputin, but eventually, the ban was lifted, and the tabloids went to town. The whole thing was a huge scandal, and everyone was freaked out that this guy was influencing the Tsar and his wife. Nicholas could have spent this period of relative peace improving his image. Instead, he spent it doing this. But as weird as the whole Rasputin thing was, so long as the economy continued to improve and the people's lives kept getting better, maybe Nick would be okay. Maybe there would be no more revolutions. Maybe this video could even end right here. Or maybe things were about to get worse. A lot worse. You see, the year is 1914, and that means it's time for World War I.
Yep. Which we will take a look on in another video. And please, I have already a video on World War I from Oversimplified on my channel, and you can check that out as well. It will take a while to edit this video, so don't expect the part 2 video to come out right after. I guess the historical misconceptions video of Salmonella will come first. But yeah, this was part 1. Very, very funny. As I said, I really, really like Oversimplified, and they seem to get even funnier every time. Russian Revolution, very interesting topic, which I do not know that much about. I think all the things I could say in the first video was almost everything I could say to the topic at all, and the second video will be me more quietly. But anyway, we are at 1:15 now, which is one of the reasons why I won't do part 1 and 2 back to back again, because I know that I talk too much. And yeah, if you like the video, please like and subscribe. The link to the original video will again be in the description, as well as all the things that I said wrong will be in the info text box while I'm saying them wrong or clarifying things. And yeah, stay tuned for either Russian Revolution Oversimplified Part 2 or the Historical Misconceptions video by Salmonella. One of those will be coming out, I guess, tomorrow or today or whenever I will upload this. So yeah, thank you very much. If you don't like the video, dislike and tell me why, would also be much appreciated. Tell your friends about it, and have a nice day, and bye bye.